It's an epic fantasy based on a beloved series of books, a film that bites off way more than it can chew, like a really greedy dachshund who's learned how to use a can opener.
Dune.
We're looking at one movie adaptation of a beloved book series, but as I'm not a book guy in general and my reading comprehension is at a, last I checked, sub-moron level, I'm reviewing this film from the perspective of a viewer. Dune was, sorry, forgive the accent, Dune, damn it! Let me try that again. Dune, or for Americans, Dune, was a 1965 fantasy novel by Frank Herbert that kicked off a series of sprawling novels detailing the intrigue revolving around the all-encompassing substance known as spice. Herbert would eventually write 6 Dune novels, with others continuing the series after his death. To say Dune is a well-loved book series is an understatement, like saying the lava flow from a live volcano is a bit warm. From the early 70s, there had been multiple attempts to adapt the books into a film, including the famously stalled project by Alejandro Jodorowsky, which would have been 10 hours long and starred the likes of Salvador Dali, Orson Welles and Mick Jagger, but like Factory Seconds sticky tape, it didn't come together. The rights were eventually scooped up by producer Dino De Laurentiis, who brought Ridley Scott on board to direct, but he too would eventually drop out.
But sire, we can't leave all this spice.
By the early 80s, David Lynch's career was on the upswing after the success of his early films, particularly The Elephant Man. At one point, he'd been approached by George Lucas to direct Return of the Jedi, and you can just imagine what a trip that would have been. When the idea of Lynch directing a version of Dune was first suggested, Lynch first had to read the book, just to make sure there were absolutely no mentions of surfboards, dune buggies, or Elvis in the film. Once that was sorted, Lynch agreed to take on the mammoth project. Dune is not a property about small ideas, and so Lynch's initial plan was to spread the story over 2 movies, though in the end they elected to tell the story in one film. To say this shows in the finished product is also an understatement, like Auntie Beryl's blood test that said she had no alcohol in the system.
Every man who has tried has died.
Some things sound like a good idea at first, but it's the practicalities that can cause endless grief. One time I avoided paying for a ticket and a drive-in by hiding out back in the trunk of a friend's car. Unfortunately for me, it was a rear-engined Porsche 911, and instead of watching Grease 2, I spent the evening in the emergency room with burns and abrasions. To this day, I can't look at either Maxwell Caulfield or Top Gear without reliving that nightmare.
Are you all right? Yes, I'm fine.
Trying to write a short synopsis for the plot of Dune is a tad difficult, like teaching a capybara to make change. The year is 10,000 and something. The galactic economy revolves around this stuff, spice, found only on the desert planet Arrakis, so controlling that planet is key. Spice does a few things. It's a narcotic, makes your eyes blue, helps expand your mind, extend your life, and allows the navigators, these giant space whale thingies, to fold space. So a trip across the galaxy is almost instantaneous, without any of that tedious mucking about in hyperspace. Oops, wrong books. But the catch with this super fast travel is that if you change your mind, there are no refunds, not even a bullshit restocking fee. The Emperor is playing games, pitting 2 rival houses against each other.
I have ordered House Atreides to occupy Arrakis to mine the spice, thus replacing their enemies, the Harkonnens.
But from the very start, it's a ploy by the Emperor who's working with the Harkonnens, and yes, it is very involved.
Baron Harkonnen will return to Arrakis and launch a sneak attack on House Atreides.
The powerful Navigators Guild adds a rider to the Emperor's plan by insisting the heir to House Atreides is killed.
I did not say this. I am not here.
Young Paul Atreides seems to have some latent abilities, which he confirms by putting his hand in this woman's box. What?
I'm itching.
As described by Emperor Infodump at the start of the film, the Harkonnens attack the Atreides forces on Arrakis and reclaim the mining operation. The triple-crossing Atreides confidant, Dr. Yueh, is apparently working for the Harkonnens, but only as a really not very well thought out way to get somebody close enough to kill Baron Harkonnen. Paul's father, Duke Leto, dies. Paul and his pregnant mum, not a duchess but the Duke's concubine, try to survive in the desert, avoiding the massive sandworms before encountering the indigenous folk, the Freemen, who very quickly anoint Paul as their new leader, thanks to a convenient prophecy.
You shall be known as Usul, which is the strength of the base of the pillar.
Prophecy is such a useful thing in fantasy. It skips so many scenes of people needing to persuade each other, convince each other, or prove their loyalty. It's okay, it's prophecy. I once tried to skip a driving test by claiming I was prophesized to be a Formula One driver. It nearly worked, apart from the bit where I had to take the driving test 14 times anyway. Paul's mother becomes a nun/witch, but also gives birth to a daughter, one who grows at an alarming rate. Which kind of sucks because, kids are expensive enough as it is. Imagine buying them a new summer wardrobe at Target and they've already grown out of the whole lot before you've even pulled out of the parking lot. After a portion of the film that's very clearly trying to compress a lot of action into a very small amount of time, Paul of Arrakis leads the Fremen on raids against the Harkonnen. A big battle takes place before the Fremen prevail and are able to dictate terms on spice production. Of course, that's skipping over so many details. It's like condensing the history of video games to Pong, Mario, Doom, The Sims, Mace Griffin Bounty Hunter, Fortnite.
The Spacing Guild and its navigators, who the spice has mutated over 4,000 years, use the orange spice gas, which gives them the ability to fold space.
Dune is a movie with a lot of world building to accomplish, but it also has to introduce the relationships as well as the political background, the technology and the characters. It does the first few things okay enough, but the characters are almost completely lost in the shuffle. Who needs character development when we can have scenes like this?
Urine and feces are processed in the thigh pads.
Paul Atreides is really the only character where we get even a hint of who he is, and even then it's all very slight.
Got to try to grab it. The suspensor field will make it slippery on the bottom. I must grip it tightly.
House Atreides are a little more civilized than the grotesque Harkonnens, especially their pustule-covered leader Baron Harkonnen, possibly the cruelest, vilest villain since that banned episode of Inspector Gadget where Dr. Claw shot Brain with a crossbow. They may look like the Weasleys of the worst timeline, but the Baron's two nephews are his main henchmen, including Sting as the one who spends most of the film looking like he's just sat on the jet in the jacuzzi. Feyd doesn't really do anything until the end, when he takes on Paul in a one-on-one battle and gets utterly wrecked. Dune is not full of super relatable characters doing relatable things, so everything needs to be explained and in detail.
It seemed the proper way.
The Atreides have a technology that lets them amplify their weapons with speech or something. They call it weirding technology, whereas the Harkonnens seem fueled by a pus-based economy. The cast are very good. Well, actually, to be more accurate, it's a very good cast. They're almost all having to spout reams of expositionary dialogue. So right at the very start, we're given a very long info dump where the Emperor explains that he's trying to get rid of his rivals Duke Leto Atreides, possibly cousin of the Oscar winner. The Atreides are the nice guys, while their rivals, the Harkonnens, are just nasty and mean sons of bitches. Paul Atreides goes on a journey from a callow young nobleman into a resistance leader. His mother becomes a sort of nun/witch hybrid, but everyone else is pretty much the same at any time you see them.
What does she fear? From my dreams. Kwisatz Haderach, the super being.
The legend. They must have killed her.
The film uses people's internal monologues to show what a character is feeling or wondering.
Ye shall know your ways, as if born to them.
But sometimes it's perhaps used to an absurd level. I've read the script, I've asked the director, I still have no idea what's going on. Kyle MacLachlan made his feature film debut here and would work on several Lynch projects, including Twin Peaks. I don't think this Twin Peaks thing has legs. What's with the coffee?
I'm not in the mood.
Not in the mood. Mood's a thing for cattle and love play.
And there are just so many familiar faces. Patrick Stewart, Dean Stockwell, Francesca Annis, Jürgen Prochnow, Sian Phillips, Linda Hunt, Max von Sydow, Virginia Madsen, Jose Ferrer, Sean Young, Brad Dourif, Sting, a very young Alicia Witt, and of course David Lynch himself. There's so much going on, it's labyrinthine, an epic film introducing so many situations, characters, races, etc. in a film just over 2 hours is asking for an awful lot of trouble. It's like going to the McDonald's drive-thru but demanding a Whopper. And then you're surprised by they actually give you a bag with the word Big Mac crossed out and the word Whopper scrawled in human excrement. Look, pro tip, in this instance, you shouldn't be surprised. Also, you really shouldn't open the bag. The score was by the band Toto with additional music by Brian Eno. Not that you'd really know it, it mostly sounds like a typical score for a fantasy film without the electronic and rock influence score you'd expect. The end credits do finally betray the rock influence of the soundtrack, but not as much as this rejected version of the end credits.
Here's the story of House Atreides, who were weirding out the Galactic Emperor. born from concubines, like their mother, the youngest one for a toe.
The best thing about the film is the production design, which gives us different looks for each of the 4 planets we see. Each of the civilizations shown has their own unique feel to the architecture, costumes, and technology. The film also manages to pull off epic vistas within the film's budget and the available technology at the time. The majority of the visual effects hold up quite well. There's an awful lot happening on screen, more than anything you'd see in one of the 80s Star Trek movies or most sci-fi fantasy films of the decade. Dune is not a cheap-looking film. It is shot in Mexico at the famed Churubusco Studios, and in general it's a quality cast doing their very, very, very best to try and make this all work. There was the intention that this was the start of a series of films, so you see lots of well-known actors cast in what turned out to be very small or minor roles. There are no small parts, only small actors, unless of course they're a star appearing in Dune. Paul's love interest is played by Sean Young, and she has at best a page of dialogue in the entire finished film, with the couple's relationship coming together very quickly, with occasional relationship status updates to remind us that they are in fact a couple.
Paul and Shawnee's love grew.
Okay, so their romance is not a focus for this version of the film, and also realistically, Dune is not a date movie. Lynch's preferred cut of the film was running at around 3 hours, but the producers and the distributor wanted a 2-hour film, which if you look at the runtime of most 80s action, adventure or sci-fi films, very few of them ran over 2 hours. Shorter movies meant theatrical exhibitors could run more sessions each day. Lynch and the De Laurentises wrestled the film down to the magic runtime by filming a few new scenes here and there and adding new voiceovers. Book fans will be able to tell us just how well they managed or didn't to give us the bones of Herbert's books. But movie fans will see a film with a high degree of heavy-handed info dumps, sudden and abrupt scenes, and in general a sense that you're only getting the gist but missing out on something. It's like a free trial of software where you can't save your work, as in this will work well enough if I had the full experience. Dune was budgeted at $40 million, but they only made around $30 million at the US box office at a time when if you didn't make your money at home several times over, you were sunk. International box office figures from its original release aren't widely available, but it's safe to assume it was not considered a hit in its day, nor has it really developed a large, appreciative fan base post-release like so many 80s box office disappointments that would later find an audience on home video and TV broadcasts. Yes, it has its fans, but there just aren't as many as you would need to keep this thing going. As miniseries were big business on TV in the 80s, several films had longer versions prepped for TV broadcast, so networks could show them in 2 parts. Dune also received the controversial re-editing for television. David Lynch, having been compelled to truncate the film for cinema release, wasn't having any of it, using the ultimate sanction for a director having his name completely removed from the credits. Dune also received an adaptation in the early 2000s for 2 miniseries on the Sci-Fi Channel before work began on another cinema adaptation. Paramount's version stalled during development before Legendary Entertainment picked up the rights. Director Denis Villeneuve's version of Dune was released in 2021 to mostly positive reaction, and a sequel greenlit almost immediately. But this version of Dune from 1984 will always be a curiosity. I remember being intrigued by articles in Starlog before the film's release, and so I made an effort to see the film in a cinema, and was so utterly baffled by it.
But if it is a trap, then why are we going?
The next time I sat down to watch this movie was now for this review. I sorta liked it enough. Boy, does it feel like watching an entire season of 24, but just the previously on 24 recaps at the start of each episode. I mean, you get the gist, but you know, damn it.
Atreides bunch, Atreides bunch. That's the way we became the Atreides bunch.
If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.